Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator. So yes, the Central Pharmacy was established back in 2010, and we have implemented fully to all 35 institutions. And the really goal of the Central Field Pharmacy was to support our individual pharmacies by purchasing large volumes of pharmaceutical medications and dispensing them through a centralized fashion, thereby receiving gains in economy of scale and labor.
Thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this issue? If not, I will entertain a motion. I get a member. That we adopt the LAO's recommendation and approve the budget and reevaluate in 2 years. Thank you all very much. And we can move on to number 8, the medical classification staffing model.
So this is a proposal whereby we're requesting a reduction of 148 positions to adopt an ongoing implementation of a new staffing model for our clinical staff that is based on inmate acuity rather than clear population numbers. The reason why this proposal is important is because during the realignment, what we noticed is that although we lost a lot of our population, the population that we lost tend to be younger inmates that were healthier. And so we were left with less inmates, but the population that were here were older and they were sicker. And we felt that in looking at a sustainable model for the future, the best way to budget for clinical staff would be to look at inmate acuity in determining how many staff we needed per prison. So this model is the culmination of that work that we did to put it in place. And this model has been, since we've adopted this model, it has been validated by an outside consultant that we hired, and it's been presented to the Department of Finance for approval, and we've sent a report to the legislature that talked about what we did to implement it.
Okay. LAO, any comments?
The only comments we have is we would point out our previous recommendation that the receiver report on this particular issue so that the legislature can have input and ensure that the proposed changes and proposed staffing model align with the legislature's priorities.
Okay. DOF? Yeah, I just have one question, and that is there has been some concern about the fact that in last year's budget, the receiver indicated that he was doing a new staffing model and that its methodology and a report on it would be submitted to the legislature and to the LAO, and then later said he would not in fact be doing that. And I just wondered if you could explain your refusal to comply with the reporting requirements that were adopted in the Budget Act last year.
Yes, Senator, I simply have to own up to the fact we did this out of order. I don't think there's any intention here to deprive the legislature or the LAO or finance of an opportunity to review. It simply took longer with my internal stakeholders. We had a large group from the institutions that was looking at this. It just took longer than I expected for that to happen. I did not want to have this go over another year. Realignment was happening. I needed to have an adjustment in staff. I simply did it out of order. If I waited another year, it'd just be another year's delay in moving things forward. And I do apologize for that. We're happy to, and I believe we've already presented the information at this point, but we're happy to have the legislature conduct an appropriate review of it.
Yeah, because we're very interested in the outcome.
Sure.
And then I noticed in the plot of medical evaluation of CCWF, they found many deficiencies, and they said that even though the population had increased, the medical staff had gone down because of the new medical staffing model. Now, that's a real concern. I have to say the committee is very, very concerned about the conditions under which women are being kept in CCWF. It's the most overcrowded prison in the California prison system. And so I'm wondering what the methodology is, and we'll be very interested in reviewing your report, because how could that happen?
Sure. Well, it certainly can happen because the methodology does not just look at population. It looks at the acuity, the medical needs of that population. And that depends then on, well, what's the exact profile of the population in a particular prison. Mental health has done the same thing. They were ahead of us in having a model that is based upon what are the mental health needs of CDCR's population as a basis for staffing, instead of it just being, let's count the number of bodies. And we also, I do have a concern about the overcrowding at the women's prison. I think there's information in the analysis. CDCR is committed to reducing that population significantly in the very near future. We have also appointed Eureka Day, one of my regionals, as sort of a director of women's health care, so that we can make sure there's a greater focus on women's health issues than we have had previously. And she, I think, is still here today, yes, and we'd be happy to make her available as well to the committee staff, because this is an issue that I think, frankly, I've neglected as requiring a specific high-level focus of the healthcare organization.
Yeah, and as you know, we do have a bill that's moving through the legislature with bipartisan support, codifying what we understand are the recent policy changes regarding sterilization of
Yes.
women in prison. However, we are very concerned about the overcrowding there and the impact on health care, and so we'll look forward to looking at the methodology. Now again, I think Senator Mitchell and I would be prepared to adopt the governor's proposal. I think Senator Anderson has requested that he wishes to vote on these items. And
are these for all the
supportive.
BCPs or one issue?
For on this one, and on, he has voted on the vote onlys in the beginning of the agenda, but he's also willing to vote on the others.
When you say this one, that's what I'm not clear about.
Oh, I'm
issue
sorry.
number
Issue number 8.
8. Perfect.
Yes, and he's also interested, he would vote aye, I believe, on the pharmaceuticals augmentation, and probably on CalPIA, which we're going to take up later
Okay.
after we get more information.
Okay.
But he's requested that we put these for vote only next week because he had to leave.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So that's what we'll do. We'll move that. We have our final item, the Armstrong compliance.
So this BCP, we are requesting 42 positions system-wide and $4 million to comply with the requirements of the Americans with Disability Act and also with the Armstrong compliance order under the court litigation for California. These positions are very critical because right now we are required, as a result of a recent agreement with the courts, we are required to provide the affirmative action of our staff affirmatively to provide services to all of our inmates with disability within the system. Right now, there are approximately 24,000 Armstrong class members system-wide. They reside in every prison. We have over 3.7 million healthcare encounters yearly, where we need to ensure that those inmates that are part of the Armstrong class receive the appropriate services, that those services are documented, that we have accountability logs in place, and we have a monitoring aspect so that we can ensure to the courts that we are in compliance with both the Americans with Disabilities Act and Armstrong. We recognize that, the LAO is concerned about the staff that are assigned to this proposal. We can only say that, like I said before, we have many, many healthcare encounters during the day, and we need staff at every prison in order to do the work that's on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. LAO?
Yeah, so as Joyce mentioned, we do have a couple of concerns with the level of staffing that are assigned to this proposal. First, we'd point out the receiver indicates that they'll achieve 100% compliance by 2014-15. And given that, we're kind of unclear about why permanent staff would be necessary to perform these sorts of audits and investigations that are associated with the proposal. And we would also note that the number of staff exceeds that which CDCR has. So CDCR, for example, has about 67 staff for this type of work, which is roughly one compliance officer or worker for every 755 CDCR employees. The ratio that would be proposed here for receiver employees would be 1 to 250. So it's a much lower ratio. And so we would recommend, as part of this proposal, approving the 2 sign language interpreters. The omission of those positions was just an oversight in the staffing of CHCF and DeWitt Nelson. We would also recommend approving 14 one-year limited term positions for the Armstrong compliance. And that's kind of based on the ratio that CDCR has and would allow the receiver to have, for example, compliance officers working at sister institutions. We would also recommend that the legislature have the receiver report on the Armstrong workload and performance metrics, including how those metrics might change as compliance improves and how they're different based on the different institutions, so that the legislature might better be able to make a determination about where staff are most needed and what the appropriate ratio of staff would be.
Thank you. Finance? Yeah, I wonder, I'd like to have both CDCR and the receiver comment on this, in that why we wouldn't have, why the discrepancy and why so many people, and why would they all need to be permanent?
Okay.
And would we not want to revisit this? Let me say, for me, 1 year isn't enough.
Right.
At the rate people hire,
Okay.
you have to have somebody on board. They should be there about 2 years. I don't see why at the end of that time there shouldn't be a relook, quite frankly.
So what I'd like to add is that we have looked at the workload on the DAI side and on the healthcare side. Our workload shows that we actually have a 332% greater workload because of our 3.7 million healthcare encounters a year than we do on the DAI side. So that accounts for the amount of staff that we need to do the job. And in terms of limited term, just because you comply with the Armstrong remedial plan, we are still going to have disabled people in prison, until we don't have prisons anymore, which would be never. But the point is, this workload will always exist, and in order to stay out of court in the future, you'll need to have a sustainable program with continued auditing with dashboard measures that you can look and see whether we're doing good or not. And that's why we believe this is a permanent workload. We want to fix this and keep the courts from coming back.
Okay, CDCR?
Clint Callan, Department of Finance again. I think the difference in resources, I think Joyce pointed out, was excellent, that the healthcare interactions at all facilities is really what they're monitoring and where the accommodation needs need to be met, whether that's a reading level or something to that effect. The 88 resources dedicated to CDCR that were court-ordered are specific at institutions that cluster inmates with disabilities. So it's kind of, again, where they're doing it across the spectrum, because in all their interactions they need to make sure that they're in compliance, and having that program statewide makes sense, where CDCR's was really more of a focused effort with known inmates that have these disabilities and making sure their accommodations are met.
Okay. And then there is a capital outlay compliance with this as well, I know.
Good afternoon. Dean Borg, representing the Facility Planning, Construction, and Management Division for CDCR. As mentioned, there's a spring finance letter for $13 million to perform improvements for ADA accessibility at 4 prisons, and then money to design the improvements necessary at another 16 projects. This stems from an effort where we've been working with the Division of Adult Institutions to determine the locations, as Mr. Kellum mentioned, the clustering locations where disabled inmates that require accessibility requirements are being housed, and these assessments have led to a determination of the physical barriers that need to be removed in order to provide this accessibility. So we are ready to proceed to construction at 4 prisons and close to being ready to begin the design for an additional 16 projects. Just to give you an example of the type of work we're talking about here is that we would go into housing units and modify the cell or dorm locations in order to allow for wheelchairs or other mobility devices that people might have, a walker or a cane or something like that. That would include showers and day rooms and sanitary facilities within the housing units. Path of travel is obviously very important to allow the person to get from their housing unit to visiting, to medical appointments, to academic, to mental health appointments. And then ensuring that in those other locations that there are accessible features available to the disabled inmate. If there's an inmate bathroom in the educational hallway, it needs to be disabled accessibility. If there's a water fountain that's available to the inmates, we need to make sure it's a high-low water fountain that allows the disabled inmate to drink from it. So we're not building anything new. We're just going in there and making sure that the existing bathrooms or the existing water fountains have that disabled accessibility.
Yep, we've done that, those of us who've worked in cities and other places. Thank you very much. Does the LAO have a comment on the spring letter?
We do, actually. So we're withholding recommendation on this proposal, and that's really because we think the proposal should have more information included that's similar to the type of information that would be included in a capital outlay BCP. So as proposed, the department mentioned that they're proposing this kind of as a modification of an existing facility as opposed to a capital outlay project. But that means that the proposal doesn't include information that would be part of cap outlay BCP, such as, a description of the existing problems, the specified construction activities, the costs associated with each of those sub-projects, and how it was determined that that was the most cost-effective method to achieve compliance with the ADA and the Armstrong remedial plan. And so we would recommend that the department report and provide information on those sorts of issues as would normally be provided in a capital outlay BCP, so that the legislature can determine whether the plan construction is aligned with legislative goals and whether it's the most cost-effective method of doing so.
Thank you, and I don't think there'd be a problem for you in complying with that, right?
Well, the issue is that the state administrative manual does not indicate this type of construction as being capital outlay. So the proposal is put together in a completely different format. We'd be happy to share information regarding the proposal with the LAO, but it just is not formulated in the same format, and that's standard with budgeting.
That's okay. I think what we need is a sharing of information so that we can make policy decisions and track things as they move forward. Well, I am going to suggest that we approve both the budget proposal and the spring finance letter is budgeted. I think we may be waiting for Senator Anderson on this one as well. We'll make it vote only. Yeah, we'll do it for vote only next week. Let me say one of the reasons really is that I want the receiver, who I thought had the ability to spend all the money that needed to be spent, to in fact have the money he believes is necessary so that we can bring this to an end and that doesn't become an issue in those discussions. If I could just say before we adjourn, because that was our last item, the committee is very concerned, and the legislature is, because there's always a buzz around the building about everything that happens, and this is such a big part of our budget that people are concerned. And they're concerned that CDCR and the receiver haven't figured out how to work together in all these years. And after 9 years of a receivership, we're still not providing adequate medical care. Now, what does it take when the courts have given the receiver the ability to do this? And what does it take in terms of cooperation from the institution, not only in rules, but in a commitment to a cultural change that will result in different outcomes than the outcomes we've been experiencing from our criminal justice investment. So overcrowding is no longer an explanation, everybody. We've built new healthcare facilities, we've spent money, we've implemented new technologies, we've hired additional staff. So when is it going to be achieved? And what's the time frame? And we really need the receiver and CDCR and the state hospitals, to the extent that they're involved, to show leadership so that the people on the ground in these institutions can feel that they're part of something exciting and positive and different, and that they will invest themselves in helping all of us get it done. So we really are hoping, believe me, our fondest hope, we want to be here this time next year saying thank you, thank you, thank you. All these things happened, and hopefully we'll get there. Do you want to comment?
I would just say that, ditto, I agree with you. I think it is important that we acknowledge progress that has been made. And the only thing that I would add is what is very disturbing to me is the fact that the receiver has not been given a clear articulation of what success looks like. And I appreciate that he's been empowered, and although he looked quite shocked when you said he had all the resources he needs, I think that was perhaps news to him today. But given the fact that this is a court-involved, sanctioned process, if they have not defined success, I think that ties all of our hands to knowing when we've arrived at our destination. And so I'm hoping that all of those parties involved will take seriously their charge to identify and define success so we know when we've gotten there.
Very well said. I would close with a line from Alice in Wonderland. If you remember, what is it, the Cheshire Cat? She wants to know which road to take. He says, well, it all depends. Where are you going? She said, I don't know where I'm going. I'm new here. And he says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So can we define where we're going and get on the road? And I was going to say, and sing a few marching songs. Right. and congratulate ourselves at the end of the road with a significantly improved institution. Thank you all for your time today, and the committee is adjourned.